everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Honestly Bilal. I'm your host, Bilal Ahmed, and I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Toledo. And this is my show, Honestly Bilal, where I sit down and talk with medical students who are interested in ophthalmology, residents training in ophthalmology, and current ophthalmologists in the field today. My guest today is Dr. Eduardo Alfonso. Dr. Alfonso is the chair of the Department of Ophthalmology at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, and he is also the director of the Bascom-Palmer Eye Institute. Dr. Alfonso, thank you so much for joining me. I was telling you a little bit before we got on here that, I have to admit, I Googled your email, and when I found it, I shot you an email saying, would you like to be on the show? And you were so kind to say yes. And I really appreciate you being here today.
It's really a pleasure to do it. And like I told you also, I'm fully in support of dissemination of information that can educate others. So I think this medium is a perfect way to achieve some of these goals. So I'm here to do anything I can to help and answer questions in a sincere, honest way, transparent. And like I said, if I say something that doesn't sound good, you all get my emails from Google. So shoot me an email and say, I don't think you were right when you said so.
Well, that's fair. Well, let's start with your origin story. I know everybody has a story about how they got into ophthalmology. So what drew you to ophthalmology and then eventually into cornea?
Well, I think as an undergraduate at Yale College, I was interested in neurosciences, so I had a double major in biology as well as in psychology. And at that time, many of the things that we studied about neurobiology had to do with the visual system. So as an undergraduate, I got interested in that, but I was really I didn't like working in the lab as much as I like working with people. So I ended up entering medical school, and I chose in particular to remain at Yale Medical School because I had already started working with some of the people there. And so I actually deferred my year of starting at Yale Medical School by 1 year. I was fortunate enough to apply as a junior into medical school and got in, but then I was able to talk Yale Medical School into giving me a year to do a little bit more independent work in psychology. So I got a grant from the Ford Foundation to look at the delivery of mental health care because I was really interested in that, and especially delivery of mental health care to minorities. So I did that, and when I got into medical school, with that incredible academic intellectual stimulation to study how the brain works, I quickly realized that psychiatry was somewhat frustrating to me. I couldn't really put my hands around the clinical practice of psychiatry. And so at that point, a mentor, a professor in the Department of Ophthalmology, Caleb Gonzalez, said to me, why don't you look at ophthalmology? And I think I was maybe the end of my sophomore year in medical school. So he introduced me to ophthalmology, something I had never thought about other than studying the visual system and other vertebrates that we studied in the lab. So that then started gearing me towards the clinical portion of ophthalmology as a way to study how the brain functions. And I ended up in ophthalmology, but a myriad of other interests. When I was, one of the reasons I had to defer my admissions to medical school 1 year was that, I applied to law school and business school at the same time because I wasn't sure that I wanted to restrict myself to medical school.
Sure.
And I even looked at combined programs. At that time, there weren't that many of an MD, MBA, or an MD, JD, because I didn't want to restrict myself in what I was studying. And then during that year, when I got accepted to medical school, I chose to go to medical school and deferred actually admission to law school and business school because at that point it was hard to reapply to medical school. So my mentor said, "Hey, if you're going to try medical school, try it before you try law school and business school, because if you deny your medical school admissions, they will probably not come back and offer you an admissions spot again." So I stayed. But
Yeah.
but as you can see, with my job, I sort of fulfilled a lot of my desires in the business world, administrative part, as director of Bascom Palmer, um, and uh, and my psychology and psychiatry has come in very handy, and being around a team
There you go.
and figuring how teams work and what makes people want to be part of a team.
Mhm. That makes sense. And the thing is that I think what's really interesting is that one of the cool things about doing something like this is you can really research people and try to learn about them online. But there's always bits of information that you just never know. And I never knew that you were interested in psychology or that you had majored in it. And I was a psychology major in college as well. I would have never thought that it was one of those disciplines that can really carry you into lifelong understanding of how people interact with you, no matter what field you're in. But I think it's interesting to know that those disciplines can carry forward into a medical specialty like ophthalmology too. So I think that's good to know.
Nothing like being able to understand personality disorders and when they become pathologic.
There you go. That's very fair. So, another thing you touched on was about building teams and what really matters from an administrative level. I'm sure a lot of your job is leadership. And, from being a resident at Bascom Palmer in the past, before leaving for fellowship and then returning eventually as a faculty member, to now being the chair and the director of Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, what has your leadership philosophy been and how has that evolved with time? And what advice do you have for, the aspiring ophthalmologists out there about how to be a good leader and how to really bring out the best in the people around you?
So, the business world has developed a term called servant leadership. And I truly believe that it fits my style where, I like to be available to people to make them excel in whatever they can excel in. And for us, a given, and we don't talk about it because we don't have to, is that excellence is a given. So we don't have to strive for excellence because we know that inside of us we all want to be excellent at what we do. So we don't have to talk about it. What we do need to talk about is creating the teams that will help each other in reaching those goals. And so servant leadership is a way of never thinking of yourself as an, uh, I would say such an important part of the group or an indispensable. I don't like to use the word indispensable but you can never think of yourself as the group having any indispensable part.
Sure.
Everyone has to play a role. And so, the classic mentioning of, a baseball team that has a superstar but can never win a championship is the classic example. And we see it over and over again in team sports that it's the team that really has a deep bench and a lot of people who can play that day and be the superstar. That's what makes things happen. So my style of leadership is somewhat aligned with team play, and yeah.
I love that. No, that's awesome. I think those are kind of things that matter is making sure that the bench has a deep enough, resource for people to really step up when needed. And you can, putting that team together, like you touched on, is really important. And going forward, I think we'll take that from you and implement it as much as we can. I want to talk about Bascom Palmer, as an institute that is on the forefront of innovation in many areas of advancement when it comes to AI and gene therapy, and even things such as, the social media accounts that, the institutional account that I know that you were part of approving for Bascom Palmer. It seems like Bascom Palmer is always pushing the needle forward and into the future. And what are some areas in ophthalmology that you really encourage the aspiring ophthalmologists out there to pay attention to in the field that you think are going to be of great growth in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think we thought we had reached the peak of the technology era, but I think technology is going to continue to drive human behavior in ways that we can't even imagine today. Uh, but I think that embracing that technology and moving it to the forefront of what you do every day. Let me just give you an example. I mean, when I was a medical student like you, I remember, going around the wards and the attending saying, well, you have to palpate the belly, you have to listen to the heart. If a Foley catheter was on the patient's bedside with the recipient, you had to pick up the urine and look at it. And sometimes you would even have to smell it to see if you thought it was contaminated or not. And unfortunately, medicine, because of the way, in part, that we get paid for what we do, has had to continue to espouse really old technology, and we have not moved forward in technologies that could really provide much more efficient, predictable healthcare, similar to the airline industry that has moved forward in technology to areas that you sometimes even question whether we'll ever need a pilot, because you can see drones fly just perfectly. And so I think in healthcare, and particularly in medical care, for the residents coming into ophthalmology, they really need to push the boundaries of how to bring in technological advances to improve healthcare. I have been telling residents that I interview when they apply to Bascom Palmer, and typically the first question that the residents ask is, or the comment they make is, well, Bascom Palmer is great because I'm going to get to do 150 cataracts. And I go, I always say the same thing. I say, and how do you know you're going to physically need to do 100 or physically need to do even cataract surgery in the future? Why don't you think of all the things that are going to be coming down the pike that you can espouse that will make cataract surgery safer, predictable, or avoidable, and move in that direction. And I think that's, we have failed to push technology as far as it can go, because we always fall back into, well, we got to do it the old way because it's the old way that it's being supported by institutions that we need. And one of those institutions is the financial institution that says we won't pay you unless you take a patient into the operating room and manually you do the cataract surgery. If you put a robot to do the cataract surgery, we aren't going to pay you.
Sure. No,
so that holds back technology, and likewise, today, fortunately, the pandemic has brought us to a state where we have to embrace technology.
Right.
And just the simple statement of the President of the United States saying, hey, executive order, we're going to pay for telehealth visits across state lines. What an incredible ability that has given healthcare to be accessible to everyone, to provide expertise at a greater degree to everyone, to be able to in a transparent way compare ourselves to what others are doing. So I wish that we could do that more often in the future and rapidly to get to where we need to be. So I think as you become a ophthalmology resident, I think the the idea that I would have at Bascom Palmer is that you would come and really push the envelope, question everything that is done every day, and say, why can't we do it in a different way that may be better than what we're doing it today?
Sure.
And break down barriers all along the way. There's no barrier that should be too high for anyone to change.
That's awesome. No, I think that's really inspiring. And I think that's the silver lining that's come from this pandemic, is that we are all noticing that be useful and be, make our voices heard and our ideas heard. And I think the thing that you touched on there about health economics and technology and how it's going to really push the, envelope of what we're going to decide to do in the future with this field will make my generation kind of step up to the plate to see what solutions we do have coming out of this pandemic, and any silver linings, that may be one of them. So Dr. Alfonso, I want to finish up here with something fun. I did go through your Twitter account and I saw that you did meet Roger Federer. So I was really jealous because I'm a big tennis fan and he's my favorite player of all time. So what was he like as a person? Was he kind? Was he, I saw you took a picture with him. I mean, you have to tell me about that experience.
No, he's a very nice individual. Actually, a Jesuit priest friend of mine had been his friend for many years. Unfortunately, the Jesuit priest passed away, but he when he came to South Florida to play, the tennis tournament happens to be close to where I live, so that was an opportunity to just take a picture with him. But I think we all know the reason why Roger Federer is who he is. Talk about a person who is driven, but driven for the right reasons, and being a role model to so many people that aspire to be someone like him. And again, we need role models in our lives to at least set a roadmap of where we want to go. And I think Roger is a great guy.
Yeah, you talk about class, humility, and then with so much grace. That's a kind of tennis player he is. And I will have to. I don't know if you play any tennis, but hopefully someday we can hit a few balls. And until then, Dr. Alfonso, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and educate all the aspiring ophthalmologists out there with your perspective. And hopefully we honor the things that you are telling us to look forward to and to really find solutions to, and we'll try our best.
Yeah, any follow-up, we'll be happy to come back and discuss any particular topic that you have in mind.
Sounds great, Dr. Alfonso. You take care.
Okay, thank you. You too.